Hi, welcome to the latest edition of the Rider Rumblings video podcast. I'm here with a refreshed Murray McCormick, having just returned from a sojourn down east. And not a lot has changed in Riderville over the past week. They've been on a bye, but we're expecting a pretty interesting week. You're looking at the receiving core. As we record this, the Rough Riders are preparing to resume practicing on a Tuesday, and barring anything surprising, Duke Williams will be on the practice field with the Rough Riders. Shaq Evans, based upon what he'd been putting on Twitter, showing him practicing or working out on his own pretty much full speed. I don't think it'll be too long before he's back. So there could be a different look to this Rider receiving core, which I think will help the offense. But Mur, how do you look at this team as it prepares for its final stretch of the season leading into the playoffs?
Well, it's kind of hard to believe you go on a bye week and lose ground. Basically, what happened there is the Stampeders keep on rolling, basically thanks to the Rough Riders providing them with the opportunity to get a leg up. And now all of a sudden, now they're so close, they're basically tied. And it was a tough bye because for the Riders, I think they have to come out and show something now. This last game against Calgary coming up on Saturday is huge. I think it's one of those deals, as Chris Jones, one of them deals where they must win, or they're going to be on the road for the playoffs for sure. And Winnipeg is just taken off too. And I don't think anybody's going to catch Winnipeg. Do you?
Only Winnipeg can beat Winnipeg at this point. And now they've got a kicker, which is going to make them tougher.
Sergio Castillo.
Two kickers. There's some concern about Andrew Harris got hurt last week, but they've shown, whether it's Johnny Augustine or Brady Oliveira, that they can also run the ball without Andrew Harris. Unless Winnipeg pulls a 1989 Eskimos, I'm not sure what's going to stop them. And it's just, or unless they're one of those Doug Flutie Calgary teams that just that didn't quite win as often as it should have, despite having really good teams. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take a collapse or some injuries. I mean, one hit on Zach Collaros could change their season around. We saw what happened to the Saskatchewan Roughriders in 2014 as a result of one hit, and that can alter everything. But barring injury and barring complacency, I don't know how anybody touches Winnipeg. Yeah, Edmonton gave them a bit of a scare, but they still won that game despite not having their A game, and that's as much as anything, I think that's to their credit. But if the Rough Riders want to have any hope of a home playoff game, they got to beat Calgary on Saturday, and it's a credibility check for this team too.
Also, Winnipeg signed another kicker that was with the Riders, Gabriel Ferraro, earlier today, which I thought was an interesting transaction. Then they trade for Sergio Castillo, so maybe they're loading up with that. But I know we're supposed to talk about, but what a great move for Winnipeg, because that was their only hole, was place kicking. That was the only spot. He said, there's something going on. We got a hole to poke in them. And boy, they sure plugged that one in a hurry with Sergio Castillo.
Yeah, I thought, if Winnipeg would have been vulnerable, it had to come down to a close game and they couldn't make a field goal. I don't think that's going to be much of a concern anymore. So a lot of people are going to have to upgrade pretty quickly. And the Rough Riders, Calgary has improved its team. They're clearly playing better. The Rough Riders now have to elevate their play, or it's going to be a pretty dismal offseason, because the optimism that was engendered by that hot start has sure disappeared in a hurry.
The hot start was, what do we say about Cody Fajardo right now? Like, is it all on Cody? I know it's not all on Cody, but he's the quarterback. He's the most popular. We both touted him as being the franchise quarterback and stuff, and I don't think they're getting franchise quarterback play out of him right now. And I know there's a lot of other issues, but when does the focus start becoming on Cody having to step up his game and return to what we saw in 2019 instead of what we've seen through parts of this 2021 season?
Well, he's missed 4 receivers for plays that should have been touchdowns. You're not going to hit all of them. Remember, in 2007, even when Kerry Joseph was named the league's most outstanding player, I can think of numerous examples where Ken Austin said, well, if we'd made that throw, there were some game-changing throws that weren't made, but the Rough Riders' record that season camouflaged those mistakes. There's no margin for error now with this football team. So Cody has got to be exacting. But I'm not sure that is problem number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. If you can't protect him, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
I go back to 1979 because I love wallowing in the past. And the Riders had Tom Clements. And Tom Clements played like a Hall of Fame quarterback before he joined the Rough Riders. And after he left the Rough Riders midway through that year, continued to perform like the Hall of Famer that he turned out to be. But during 7 games with the Rough Riders in 1979, 2 touchdown passes, 11 interceptions that he was running for his life. And the problem was an offensive line that couldn't protect him. And I would think right now that is the number 1 issue with this football team. It doesn't matter who your receiving core, who comprises your receiving core. It doesn't matter who your quarterback is. If you can't protect that quarterback, it's immaterial. And there was one play against Calgary in the Rough Riders' most recent game where he actually did get decent protection and he took off out of the pocket anyway, which leads me to think there's not a lot of trust in that offensive line, and maybe he's hearing ghosts or seeing ghosts. And we listened to Cody after the game against Calgary, and he was certainly frustrated, and ended up apologizing for those comments. But I don't think there was a syllable that he uttered that hasn't been proven to be true.
Exactly.
They need better receivers. He needs better protection, and I think they need a better scheme. I don't think their play calling has been suspect. They don't have a running game that scares anybody. William Powell is a good back, but you're not going to go into a game thinking, if you're the opponent, thinking we've got to stop William Powell. He doesn't scare anybody. If there's 5 yards there, he'll get the 5 yards. But nobody's thinking William Powell has to be stopped. He's not the kind of back that's going to terrify an opposition. So, and you look at the receivers as the Rough Riders have rolled them out in recent weeks, because there's nobody the opposition's got to look at and say that receiver can absolutely blow the game open on us. Now the Rough Riders are in a situation with Duke Williams, the prospect of Shaq Evans returning. They do have receivers, or will have receivers of that caliber. But again, it goes back to, if Cody Fajardo's only got 1.8 seconds in which to throw, it doesn't really matter, does it?
No, and I don't see how you fix that offensive line quickly. I don't see guys on the roster like Cameron Jefferson got bumped down. Brett Boyko's playing like he played in BC a little bit now. He struggled in BC and he ended up getting benched there. Evan Johnson had a horrible game against Calgary. I think Dan Clark's about the only guy that's really kind of been relatively consistent.
He got lit up in that last game against Calgary.
So it's hard to blame them all. And Logan Ferland's playing about as what we expected him to play with. And I've drawn a blank on the left tackle, Andrew Lauderdale. Sorry, that's it. Yes. So things have. I don't know how you fix an offensive line with 5 games to go in a season. I really don't know. We've been around football a long time. There's not a lot of time left. Like, every game is important, and you can't go out and get someone of an offensive lineman of a Duke Williams ilk, because teams aren't going to extend to that, where they're using them right now. So I don't know how they fix this offensive line, other than it becomes on Jason Maas, maybe come with a different offensive scheme that provides Cody with some sort of protection or somehow, unless it's up to the Riders to do that. But don't you think? I just think replacing an offensive lineman at this time of the season is really hard, unless it's injury. And add in the COVID parts, at least when you have to keep a guy out for 7 days or 14 days. So really, it's pretty well they got to go with the offensive line they've got, which is kind of scary, I think, isn't it?
It is kind of scary. I mean, you look back to 2018, and Riders were able to get Philip Blake.
Yes.
For the Montreal Alouettes. No, it's complicated a bit now. The trade deadline is October 27th. It's barely a week away. So, is there an offensive lineman that can be had from a team that's struggling? But if the team is struggling, do you want that offensive lineman?
Exactly.
They're pretty much stuck with going with what they have, and so the onus is going to be on Steven Sorrells to coach him up better. Jason Maas, early in the year, I think he was able to scheme around the lack of protection with the quick passes, but the other teams have seen that that's pretty much all the Rough Riders have for a passing game is short passes. And if you take that away, they're not going to be able to go over the top with any consistency. And even if they get you once, I don't think the opposing teams are that concerned if the Rough Riders burn them over the top once, because I think they realize if it happens once, that'll be it. They don't have the capability of of making them pay 2, 3, or 4 times. So if they get you once, they get you once. But on balance, they can crowd the receivers with impunity. And the thing too that Calgary showed is that if you can rush the passer with 4 people, even 3 on occasion last game, then you can put everybody else back into coverage, and that makes it even tougher to pick away at a defense. And that seems to be the MO of Jason Moss, somewhat philosophically and somewhat in terms of by necessity. So I go back to the game in Calgary when the last play to Ricardo Lewis, it was intercepted by Jonathan Moxey. The Rough Riders tried to build in protection. They kept Braden Lenius and William Powell in the backfield.
Yeah.
So as a result, they had 4 receivers going against 8 defensive backs, and pretty much everybody's double covered. That's just basic math. Mm-hmm. And so if you build in extra protection, you've got fewer receiving options. You take away the extra protection, and you got no time. So where's the solution? Is it would you rather get hit by a truck or a bus?
Yeah.
You know?
And actually there's a bus right beside you right now in the Stampeders who 3 or 4, how many podcasts ago, because we missed a week, we thought the Stampeders were right for the pickings. We really thought this was a team that was struggling. The Riders could bury them, get all comfortable, a nice sort of stretch run down there. But when the Stampeders are who we think they are, they're a franchise that doesn't rebuild, it just reloads. And I think that's, I know it's cliche, but they've really done a great job in getting back. And Bo Levi's playing as well as, it's not lighting it up, but he's playing well enough that they're winning. Didn't throw a pick the last game. So I think that's a good sign for the Calgary people. It's a bad sign for the Riders. And boy, if they lose this one, Rob, their schedule isn't, I looked at their schedule. It's hard to do that in the CFL when you look at the schedule because the teams are, but they got Calgary, they're at Montreal, Edmonton, and then Hamilton. And all those teams are combined 16 and 21 right now as of today. So, and you look at Calgary and they've got Saskatchewan, Ottawa, and then BC and Winnipeg, and they're 21 and 18 overall. So who's got the tougher schedule, do you think? Think the Riders?
You also have to factor in the Rough Riders only have 1 home game left.
Yes.
That's they've got to come out. It's a credibility check for this team on Saturday. Mm-hmm. They've got to come out and beat a team that they gave pretty much threw a life preserver to, and that has since squashed the BC Lions.
Yeah.
So they've got to cool them off in a hurry to have any hope of getting a home playoff game. When all this started, it was a 5-2 team against a 2-5 team, and now Calgary's ahead of the Rough Riders in pretty much any power rankings you look at. So it's on the coaches, it's on the leaders.
Can the defense carry them, Rob? Can this defense step up and be the one that's like similar to Chris Jones's teams? His offenses were okay, but their defense was just so lights out. I think this defense can come back from the bye week and just step up and carry them for the remainder of the season and just let the offense do what it does.
Well, what more can you ask of the defense? This is the Canadian Football League. The Rough Riders allowed 23 points and lost. They allowed 22 points and lost. Mm-hmm. In the CFL, if you're giving up low 20s, you're giving your team a chance to win. The offense has to make a play. I just don't know if they have the capability of making enough of those plays to turn things around. This could all be proven wrong on Saturday. That's what this team has to do on Saturday, is show that there is a pulse. Because right now it's really hard to get too excited about what the prospects are for this football team. And it sure has been a seismic change compared to earlier in the year when you thought, okay, this is going to be a team that has a chance to get to the Grey Cup. Now it's a matter of, can they get a home playoff game?
Always keep those East wins in perspective, eh? It always keeps it back to those wins against East Division teams that fire you up and get people more excited about what they actually are. And just like some East Division teams are good. It's not saying all that, but they seem to be more important than when they get down to the stretch. It's got to have games. You got to beat the West Division teams.
And that's why the Rough Riders have struggled. Yeah, they're 2-0 against the BC Lions.
Yeah.
But either of those games, as it turns out, could have changed if BC had a kicker.
Exactly.
The first game of the year, BC missed a couple of field goals that could have changed that game. And then when the Rough Riders were in BC, the Lions missed a 43-yard field goal. and had they made that field goal, the Rough Riders wouldn't have been able to come back. So they're basically 3 missed field goals away from instead of being 5-4, they could be 3-6 right now. And there's a lot of doomsaying here, but the Rough Riders really haven't done much to give people a reason to think that it's going to change. We could be having an entirely different podcast a week from now if they can show that all of this is just hot air dispensed by yours truly and the both of us.
But what do you think of what can they do over this 5-game stretch, Rob? Do you think they have to go 5? Do they have to win them all? Can they go 2-3-2? What do they have to do down this stretch?
Well, the Edmonton would seem to be a couple of gimmies there. Yeah, they gave it Winnipeg a good run, but it's still an Edmonton team that's largely in disarray. So you look at that. Hamilton, you never really know what you're going to get out of Hamilton. They're a middling team, but again, they've had they're almost the inverse of the Rough Riders. If a few plays go their way that haven't gone their way, they could be at or near the top of the East Division. Montreal is a bit of a wild card because we're really not sure if Matthew Schultz has some staying power there. What if Trevor Harris is quarterbacking Montreal by the time the Rough Riders face them? There's got a ton of talent on offense. Trevor Harris is sort of walking into the same situation that didn't work in Edmonton, where there's a ton of weapons, but can they deploy them? And he wasn't able to make it happen in Edmonton this year, but he's going to a Montreal team that's got William Stanback and a really good receiving core.
But Stanback can't stay healthy though, eh? I know he's putting all these yards against food poisoning. No, I just wonder a little about him. I know it's not very often quarterbacks are traded in the CFL. As soon as they say that, I remember the Riders trading Zach Collaros.
Yeah.
So it's funny that just even for the guy, and I can't even remember who they traded him for again. I wrote it down. That was a weird.
Goodness, that is a good trivia question, isn't it? Was it a conditional draft pick or something?
Well, there was a defensive lineman in there, and I guess a defensive tackle. Montreal has a lot of defensive tackles, from what I understand, so they could trade from strength. But a quarterback for a defensive lineman? That's a strange trade, isn't it?
Well, Edmonton made it clear they weren't going to keep Trevor Harris around, and they don't have a lot of leverage in that situation. And got to keep in mind that they're also shedding a big contract.
Yeah.
So as much as anything, you're just getting rid of the contract. It's like one of those NHL trades where you just get rid of somebody just to dump the contract if somebody will take it. And so, but Montreal's a bit of a wild card. The East is a little flaky this year because Montreal, you're never really sure what you're going to get, and Hamilton's been the same way. And those happen to be the 2 Eastern teams the Rough Riders face. Yeah. But we'll have a much better idea on Saturday night as to whether this Rough Rider team has any real staying power. I mean, if they lose this one, suddenly they're 500. And you know what's creeping in? A bit of Danny Barrett syndrome, where suddenly the Riders give other teams a bit of life. When Danny Barrett was here, they would lose to teams that had inferior records, and they would do so habitually. But they would also surprise you by beating teams that maybe you think they couldn't beat. But ultimately, they would be undermined as far as getting a home playoff game because they couldn't beat the teams that were so beatable. I go back to 2003, when they were the only team to lose to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Yeah, they ended up just missing a home playoff game in 2003. That one was an absolute killer. You go back to 2004, Winnipeg Blue Bombers won only 7 games that year, and 3 of them were against the Rough Riders, who ended up finishing 9-9. 2005, they lost twice to the Renegades, who were such a success that season they ended up folding. And in 2006, the Rough Riders couldn't beat an Edmonton Eskimo team that ended up not even making the playoffs. And again, those were the 9-9 years, 3 straight 9-9 seasons after 11-7, and they flirted with home playoff games. So when Ken Austin got here and he was succeeded by Ken Miller, they started beating the teams they should beat. And that's what, to me, is most troubling about losing to Calgary, is they faced an opponent that was on the ropes, and suddenly their records are, their fortunes are as disparate as they seem to be when they started, when this 3-game-in-a-row stretch began, except now it's the Calgary Stampeders who seem to have the advantage and not the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. They've given Calgary a life, just like those Danny Barrett teams used to make struggling teams look like Grey Cup champions for a week.
I don't think a playoff game is enough I think they need to still, if they somehow can get a home playoff game, like that's the standard here now, isn't it? The standard are home playoff games. It's nothing crossover berth. Oh, it's okay. It's not what they play for. It's not just to go on the road. So I think their goal has to be a home playoff game, and you know it is. I'm not saying they wouldn't say anything differently that way, but as I've said, the standard here for the Riders is home playoff games, and especially with the Grey Cup game coming next year, a little momentum build up off of that. Kind of do those kind of things. But as you said, it all starts Saturday, and if it doesn't go well for them on Saturday, if they continue to play with all the holes and things that have happened to them, I think that home playoff game's out the window right now. So
well, if you look at the last home playoff game, the West Final of 2019, and even though they finished in first place that season, even though they had a home playoff game, they didn't kind of sit on those laurels or rest on those laurels. They decided that even though Stephen McAdoo had played a key role in the success and emergence of Cody Fajardo, it wouldn't have happened by accident. The numbers speak for themselves. The feats speak for themselves. Cody Fajardo emerged as a CFL star when Stephen McAdoo was the offensive coordinator. But they decided that they could stand to improve in that area. Out goes Stephen McAdoo. In comes Jason Moss. Yeah. And here we are 2 years and most of one season later. I don't think you can definitively say that has been a successful move. They made it clear after the 2019 season that they set a standard that was higher than the one they reached in 2019, and good for them. Yeah. But is that move ultimately going to backfire? Because it just doesn't look like that system is a success right now. But in fairness to Jason Moss, what can he do when there's no offensive line? There's not a running back that scares people, and their receiving core has been decimated. Remember back in training camp when we were raving about the caliber of this receiving core?
No way.
That was a lot of hot air and a lot of keystrokes that were in vain.
I keep saying, I know we all get caught up in training camp, man. This doesn't say much until the season starts. We were so high on that receiving core, and it looked good. And right now, it doesn't look that good right now, unless Duke Williams steps up and becomes the superstar he was in that one season in the CFL. Like Duke Williams, it'll be interesting to see what he does and see how they utilize him and where they're going to utilize him. I know, but let's just see if it's going to be a wide receiver. Is it going to be the slot? You never know till we get up there.
It would have to be the slot, you would think.
Yeah, especially if Shaq comes back. But Craig Dickinson mentioned before we went on the bye week that Shaq was still a couple of weeks away after the bye week. So we'll see how well he's recovered since then. But
Duke Williams was a CFL All-Star in 2018. Yeah. Well, that's nice, but Jordan Williams-Lambert was the West Division's Rookie of the Year in 2018. And he was never able to recapture that when he came back from the NFL. Now you're getting Duke Williams coming back from the National Football League. Is he the same player that he was 3 years ago, or even 2 years ago when he played in the National Football League and even caught a game-winning touchdown pass? There shouldn't be an adjustment to the system because he's playing for Jason Moss, and that's the system in which he thrived in Edmonton. But is he still the same player as he was 3 years ago? Is he the same or arguably better at 28 than he was at 25? They don't have a lot of time to wait on this.
No. Well, he's on the team. Regardless, right now he's on the team, so it's just. And he's going to clear COVID protocols. Obviously, he's cleared them, we hope. Haven't heard otherwise. So he's on the team. I remember Jeremy O'Day saying that back in training camp. You bring a guy in, he's on the team. There's no sort of wiggle room anymore. Very little wiggle room. So that's what happens with COVID. I think that's about. What are you thinking? Can we talk a little bit about Rod Black leaving? What do you think of that? I know it's not. We don't really know the reasons, but there's a guy that I.
Yeah, it just
stunning. Middle of the season.
Strange, just in the middle of the season. But that had been a deal that he'd made with TSN management, and it appears now, based upon stories that I've seen elsewhere, that it was another situation where TSN or Bell Media was looking to make changes, not performance based at all, but based upon salary, and so that's. And TSN's got some Dustin Nielsen. Has really been a revelation this year. Marshall Ferguson is really good, and they've got Rod Black. So they've got Rod Smith. So they've still got very capable people. But Rod Black is a loss for TSN. I know there were people who would pick apart what he did. Rod Black is such a tremendously talented broadcaster, and why they couldn't at least get through the season without changing things up is disappointing. But I don't think he will continue to be excellent at whatever he does. I know he's not ready to pack it in yet. And just such a nice man too.
I remember walking along Front Street one morning before a game, and this guy yells out, "Hey Murray!" And I look over and it's Rod Black, recognized. This before face masks too, by the way, when you could recognize people on the street. And he said, and his first question he asked me was, "How's the family?" And I thought, wow, why would he? Rod, it's just nice, just a nice little 5-minute conversation. And I've really been a big fan. I know people have been really slammed him a lot of times, been very critical of him, but I didn't see it as badly as that. I didn't see he's deserving as much criticism as he was. He did so many different sports and did them all very well and prepared and enthusiastic. And it is a big loss for TSN, big loss for the sporting community, I think. And some people are going to disagree with me on that, but hey, when you meet a guy as nice as that, you kind of wish and you hope things kind of ended in a good way for him. And unfortunately, it didn't end that way at TSN. But I think he's going to land on his feet somewhere, and that'll be good for him.
Absolutely. Well, I should let you. Sorry, go ahead.
And I know you've been busy covering high school football and Rams and Thunder and watching. I don't know how many games you've seen in the last 10 days, but boy, you've sure seen a lot of football.
It's been fun. I'm working on a column right now. The best football. Basically the premise is 3-down football is alive and well. I'm not sure it is at the Canadian Football League level. You look at Friday night at Mosaic Stadium and Thursday night at Mosaic Stadium. And the classic game between Leopoldus and Miller, and just an amazing football game. You look at the Regina Thunder game on Sunday when the Thunder's down 36-12 and they end up winning 45-42 in overtime to clinch first place.
Crazy.
You even look at the Rams game on Saturday. Yeah, they blew a 23-0 lead, and the game ended up being 31-30 for UBC in overtime. But again, tremendous football game. Where are these games in the Canadian Football League? Where is a game like the Monday night Buffalo-Tennessee game in the Canadian Football League? Where's a game like the New England-Dallas game in the Canadian Football League? You're seeing great football everywhere, but in the CFL. And
good thing you didn't mention that Pittsburgh-Seattle game.
Well, yeah, Denver-Oakland. I'm in no position to pick on your teams right now. Denver's basically pulled a Saskatchewan Roughriders 3-0 start against mediocre competition, and then the elevator cable snaps, and so does my patience. I should let you get to practice, Mur, unless anything else like that.
I can't. Sorry to bring that up. I know we're going to try to keep it a little briefer, but that's all right. It was fun chatting football.
Always great to chat, and we'll do this with a little more substance next week because we'll have seen the Rough Riders play, and hopefully it's a better showing than we've seen recently, just in terms of something that can get people excited. Because right now there's not a lot of buzz about this football team, and the Rough Riders can restore some of that on Saturday. But and now for the predictable ending, which I am, with a gun to my head, forced to announce, because this is what everybody does when they do a podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review and a 5-star rating. It helps us grow the podcast. Now you know why. I think I'm still on a bye week. My tongue's away. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to send us a question, you can email Rob, that's me, at rvanstone@postmedia.com, and we'll rate it on the show. You can follow me on Twitter at Rob Vanstone, or Murray at Murray LP. And here is the weekly candy check. She's sleeping on her back, being adorable. And she's also featured in this year's Humane Society calendar. So for Murray McCormick, she's April, which is perfect because we got her in April. For Murray McCormick, I'm Rob Vanstone. Thanks for being with us today, and we'll look forward to speaking with you again next week. Take care. Stay safe.